How's it going, guys? It's Rickster. I'm back with Cure Audio. Today I'm going to be showing you kind of how I'd go about making a growl with Operator or Citrus or Serum 2, basically any synth like Operator that lets you do FM with custom harmonic like waves, or you can draw your own partials, harmonics, you know, that kind of thing. Because basically this kind of technique is based on like an old kind of old thing. I can't remember when I learned it. I learned it years ago from like an old YouTube tutorial where you essentially just take a sine wave in an FM synth and then you FM it with just something, just random like harmonics, right? You're already getting this really cool, like rare kind of tone out of it. So I kind of took that technique and ran off of it. I added on to it. I added some other classic, I'm saying classic, but like this is a lot of growl techniques that come from places like the Growl Discord server. Shout out my boys over there. You know, it's all based on this kind of a starting patch, right? That was what I have here is the one that I'm using in the current rack that I built here to show everything else I do when I build growls mainly. And then some variations you can approach it. Like here in Citrus, I have it kind of going on 2's going into Operator 1, and then Operator 3 is also going into Operator 1. And I'm just using the volume control map to the XY of volume 2 and 3, and I have them kind of switching places, so you get this kind of like... Yeah, you get this like kind of cool little movement to it, and then you can macro this and whatever. I had this patch in Serum because you can do other cool shit with Serum too, where you like I have these custom drawn oscillators with the partials, and I'm essentially I'm going in here and I added these like you can crossfade between them, so you can have all these shapes. And not only can you just automate this, but now you can crossfade between different like randomly drawn shapes. You can bend them, warp them, you know, do a lot of cool shit. But past all that, let's actually get into the meat and like bones of like what's actually happening in this patch. So we have stuff that kind of happens in stages, right? So first is the just basic operator patch, right? Essentially what I'm doing is I just have I've picked the mode where D, C, and B all modulate operator A. They're all distorting it. Essentially, I just have one that's detuned a little bit. The actual outgoing operator is up an octave. And then I just have some random shapes drawn in all of them. Just like I drew stuff till it sounded good. I detuned one a little bit. I turned off phase restarting on one of them. So when you play it, you get a kind of different sound every time you play it, which I think is really fun to do with growls. I like to have a lot of slow moving decorrelated things that aren't obvious, because then at the end they all add together and you get this really like organic moving sound that I really like. It's not super static and stays in one place, you know? So the main patch sounds like this. I just have the 2 levels macroed. I have an LFO on the actual volume of B doing very slow movement. And then I have the tone knob also macroed. So, you know, it's pretty boring right now, but like this is, you know, we're just starting. So again, bouncing off that idea of having some stuff moving very slowly in kind of subtle ways, I have a phaser just doing some very slow kind of sweeping. And I have a flanger doing some very slow sweeping. Just in ways that I thought sounded cool. So now we get to like the real like classic methodology that a lot of people have talked about before, where you take a bandpass and you triple OTT it. And the reason why you might see I'm using the old Ableton auto filter, it's because you can hear it that it is quite noisy when compared to when you compare it to the old Ableton, the newer updated Ableton auto filter. So there's a reason I'm using that. I found that the kilohertz filters, like the nonlinear filters, can get you a really similar effect to this. I found the volcano filters can work really well for like getting some noisy kind of artifacty filters. Volcano from Fab Filter, you know, play around with a bunch of like old filters, you know, they make weird sounds, use them. But I think, you know, it leaves a little bit to be desired. You know, it's still quite boring. Then just to finish off this first stage, at least, if I go back and I turn off these the final effects. Essentially, this is what we're working with. I think this is a good start. So now what we're going to do after we've created this kind of soft bass sound is I'm going to be trying to not only distort it so the OTTs have something to pull up besides just noise, but I'm also going to try to generate artifacts. So the way I'm doing that right now is just pretty simple. I'm just doing some like pretty basic low mids distortion with an overdrive. I guess just like mids. And I'm just using a dynamic tube from Ableton. You can use Homicide, Trash, whatever you'd like. This is what I'm kind of sticking with my distortion. Of course, you have your kind of classic methodology for artifacts that isn't actually that talked about, but it's corpus. If you set it at a very slow LFO rate, at a very low tune note, when you turn on the OTTs, you start hearing this kind of like this kind of crunchy artifacts in the high end, which is really cool. Of course, you could use corpus in ways not just doing that. You can use it to add cool resonances. You can use it to add some crunch to the patch. You play with like the shapes. Unfortunately, Corpus does have a third-party equivalent. This is by AAS, and they have their own VST version of it, and it's called Object Delay. And unfortunately, Object Delay is like a better technically sounding plugin than Corpus. Like, it does not create artifacts the way Corpus does. So yeah, we can turn this back on. And so here's where we get into vowels, right? So the classic way that I like to make vowels is it's kind of like three ways you can go about it. One is, well, there's kind of one way that I think sounds the best. And it's just, you create kind of 2 to 4 peaks. I'm just doing 3 right now, between like 900 hertz to like 3000 hertz. You could just use a straight up EQ to do it. You can use a phaser with some feedback. You could use a like wow filter or another formant filter and just leave it in one place to just get some nice high resonances. Like you can kind of see what you see, these 3 peaks that kind of come in when I toggle this phaser, and that's how you get a really nice kind of vowel to a growl. You don't need to move that because a lot of the main actual talking of it's coming from this earlier bandpass and FM movement. And then I'm going to go over this post high pass in a bit. But first I'll just turn on the final kind of stage of just your last OTTs, 1, 2, whatever, however many you want. Making sure you were starting to pull up the crunch and stuff that we were making earlier. Normally I will work on growls while I have an OTT turned on so I can kind of hear how hard I can push a distortion before it starts sounding bad, or how many artifacts I can add, or how much I can EQ before stuff starts to get a little out of control. And then there's just the final saturator to push it up that extra couple of dB, and then a final kind of EQ to do the final kind of tone shaping. So about the post high pass, right? I find this is one of my favorite sounds in a growl when you have a normal kind of main modulation going on. But if you also have a high pass, like a kind of high pass to move against or with the main macro, and you like modulate them differently. Maybe you can map them to like an XY. You can get some really cool, complex kind of movement without really doing that much. You know, it's just 2 macros. You can make it go crazy, sound like Reptile or whatever. So yeah, that's kind of my basics for a growl. Like I just have an auto filter in here and then a band split to make sure my sub isn't cut by the high pass. Of course, you can take this and do whatever you want with it. You could put vocoders in here. You can resample growls now. You can start playing with more complex kind of filtering and like EQ shaping and whatnot. You know, it's really totally up to how you want to set up this patch. So I'm going to put this patch. It's going to be available for download on the website in the description. See you guys later.